Man, there is so much to talk about on this show. It's going to be a little bit different. Normally on this show, I do about 1 or 2 topics, and I stretch it out for the podcast, maybe 20 minutes to a half hour. But there's so much crap to talk about in this podcast this week. So we'll jam it all in. We'll see how it goes. Realistic Randy, Mediokr, Best Sports Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Starting with, so I'm going to talk about a little bit more in the preseason. Some guys that stood out, maybe some potential cuts in the 53-man roster. We'll talk about that. There was a trade for Brett Jones from the New York Football Giants. We'll talk about that. A couple of players, Kyle Sloter, still going to be the QB3 according to Mike Zimmer. I'm going to react to that. Laquan Treadwell, I'm going to give him a shout out as well. But before we get into that, a couple of players that were related to the Vikings, whether they played with the Vikings or play with the Vikings currently, or maybe they're connected and somehow. Going to get into that real quick. So first, the number one topic, the first topic I'm going to get into is Teddy Bridgewater, traded from the New York Jets to the New Orleans Saints. Now, I predicted that he would go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but, maybe I'll take half credit. He did go to the NFC South Division. I'm just kidding. He's going to the New Orleans Saints. Possibly the heir apparent to Drew Brees whenever he decides to retire. We'll see how that goes. But it's interesting and very ironic because the first regular season game that Teddy Bridgewater played in was against the New Orleans Saints. So Matt Castle went down. I forgot at what point during that game. And I remember where I was at. I was in San Diego. I was at a Vikings bar. It was called, I believe, the Guava Bar out in San Diego. It's out in Mission Beach, if I'm not mistaken, close to Pacific Beach. Anyway, it's out next to the beach. It's a bar out there, really, really cool. They share it. It's like a Vikings/Broncos bar, but it was really cool. And I saw Teddy Bridgewater play, and I gotta admit, I wasn't on the Teddy Bridgewater train as far as when we drafted him. I was a little bit disappointed. I was like, get Johnny Manziel, damn it. That's right, I'll admit it. I was all for Johnny Manziel. I'm glad we didn't go that route because that dude's got a ton of problems he's got to work on. I mean, he's back in the CFL, but we'll see how he does. But my thing is, after we missed on him, I was like, hey, go after Derek Carr, and we ended up taking Teddy Bridgewater. So I was a little bit disappointed, but when I saw him play, I was like, okay, this dude's got something. So you know what? He's never had a fair shake. He's never got a fair opportunity to play with a good offensive line, with good play calling. And I believe with Sean Payton in New Orleans, if he is going to take over for Drew Brees when he decides to retire, I think this could be a very good next chapter for Teddy Bridgewater. So shout out to him. The Jets got a 3rd-round pick from the New Orleans Saints for that trade. So actually it was good for both teams. The Saints, they probably have their future quarterback for the franchise, and the Jets, they get a 3rd-round pick for Teddy Bridgewater. So good for both sides on that. Next, Aaron Rodgers gets a 4-year extension worth $134 million, over $100 million guaranteed. And you know what? I hate the Packers and I hate Aaron Rodgers as much as any Vikings fan. But the fact is, this dude, taking all that aside, this dude's one of the best quarterbacks I've ever seen. I would even argue that he's the best quarterback as far as just talent-wise that I've ever seen in my life, man. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it's well-deserved. Kirk Cousins, he may have set this trend. And I like to see Odell Beckham Jr., he got a nice contract extension too. You're seeing now this shift in economical form for these NFL players, where before it was like the owners had all the power, but now you're seeing some NFL players have the power now where they're controlling their destiny. And good for these players, man. They should be able to get as much money as they deserve and as much money as they feel that they're worth. The only thing I would say is if you're going to play in the NFL, if you're going to be a professional football player, don't play running back, folks. If you're trying to make a lot of money, look at Le'Veon Bell. He's been holding out forever, and he's going to come back, I believe. His teammates say he's going to be back before the start of the regular season. But you know what? You can find running backs. They're out there. But now you're seeing quarterbacks. I mean, quarterbacks, they've already been making a lot of money. But ever since Kirk Cousins and that deal he's got, everyone's like, well, screw this. Give me some guaranteed money too. And now you're seeing wide receivers get – I thought wide receivers, in my humble opinion, you can find wide receivers anywhere. But you're seeing the wide receiver market is just growing exponentially. So good for these players. Good for Aaron Rodgers for that extension. And you know what? It's going to be a good rivalry for the foreseeable future as long as Mike Zimmer is the head coach, the defensive wizard that he is. And Aaron Rodgers is the future quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. So good for Aaron Rodgers on that. And now that's 2 positive stories, right? As far as connected to the Vikings somehow. Let me get into 2 stories that aren't necessarily so great. Number 1, Michael Kendricks. Good Lord. The brother of Eric Kendricks, also plays linebacker. The both of them do. And the Vikings, they hosted Michael Kendricks on his free agency visit, I believe, after the Eagles cut him before he ultimately signed with the Cleveland Browns. And I was all for Michael Kendricks. My thing is, if you're going to get rid of Anthony Barr, and I'm never going to stop believing that, I think you should trade him, quite honestly, before you end up giving him, a $12 million a year contract or $10 million, whatever it is that he's looking for. I say, hey, Michael Kendricks, he could be a good place filler for Anthony Barr before you decide to go on to another linebacker after that. But anyway, Michael Kendricks, according to U.S. Attorney William M. McSwain, he announced indictments against Michael Kendricks on insider trading. What? What are you saying? I mean, all right, fine. We dodged a bullet with that, so thankfully we don't have to deal with that. That's the Cleveland Browns issue, and that sucks for them because the Cleveland Browns, they've been on the up and up this offseason. They've really bolstered their roster up, and I've been making fun of them a lot, but kudos to them. They've made a really good turnaround, but this doesn't look good. This isn't really good for them, and it's really not good for Michael Kendricks. From what I've seen, I don't have it in front of me, but what I've seen on Twitter from some legal experts and some verified sites that this dude could possibly face jail time, like up to a year in prison, maybe 12, 18 months, whatever it is. And Michael Kendricks literally said a statement released by his attorney, insider trading. Are you serious right now? He said, quote, 4 years ago, I participated in insider trading and I deeply regret it. I invested money with a former friend of mine who I thought I could trust and who I greatly admired. Okay, so I thought I could trust him. So you're admitting it, but you're like, oh, well, I had no idea I trusted him. His background as a Harvard graduate and an employee of Goldman Sachs gave me a false sense of confidence. So you're admitting it, but you're at the same time, you're like, well, I had no idea what this was all about. So, and then he also went on to say, quote, while I didn't fully understand, this is all from CBSNews.com, quote, while I didn't fully understand all of the details of the illegal trades, I knew it was wrong. Oh, okay. And I wholeheartedly regret my actions. So it's kind of like a half, well, I admit it, and then half, well, I didn't know all the information. So, that's just really unfortunate because this dude, hopefully the idea was, I believe he was getting, $3 million? He was getting a pretty low ball offer, at least based on whatever his standards were from the Cleveland Browns, maybe play and get a little bit bigger money in the next year after that. But this is really just terrible and really sad, quite honestly. And then not only that, this day, so I'm recording this on, what's today? Oh man, it's so late right now. I'm so damn tired. But anyway, this Wednesday right now? This was a whole day of news in football. Aaron Rodgers, big deal. Teddy Bridgewater gets traded. Michael Kendricks gets indicted on insider trading charges. And then not only that, Vikings Caleb Jones arrested for alleged theft and domestic assault. And so basically, look, Michael Kendricks, he got released already by the Cleveland Browns. He's got legal issues to deal with. Caleb Jones, he's going to be cut probably tomorrow, whatever it is. He's going to be cut, no big deal. But look, I'm going to say something that I really never really wanted to go there, but I'm just going to say it, and I honestly don't care anymore. What is it with football players, bro? Like, what is it about these dudes? You ever see in between mini camp and training camp when they got that time off and everyone's saying, oh, man, I hope nobody gets arrested. Please, nobody get arrested. Why is it like that? You don't see that in baseball or basketball, right? You don't see that. What is it about these football players where charges? Now, I get insider trading. That's a whole new thing. I've never seen that before as far as for a professional athlete in football. I haven't seen that. If anyone knows of anything in the past, let me know at realistic_Randy on Twitter. But these charges, federal crimes, domestic assault, battery, all these sorts of things, it's become the norm now. Now it's more so during an off season, I'm just like, oh, okay. Or even in between minicamp and training camp, I'm like, oh, okay, what's going to happen tomorrow? Who's getting arrested tomorrow? It's just so common for these dudes to just get arrested on dumb stuff. What's up with football players, man? I just honestly don't get it. You don't see it in any other sports. I get that football is a 53-man roster, but this is absolutely ridiculous. You're the domestic assault, just all this type of stuff. It's just ridiculous, and it's become the norm to where it's like you become desensitized to this stuff. It's like, this is just the norm. I expect this stuff to happen. It's really a bad look, but it just is what it is. When it comes to the sport of football, it's like you have to compartmentalize all the other crap that goes along with it and just enjoy the sport. But that's really bad. And you know what? Eric Kendricks' brother, Michael Kendricks, he's going through all that. How is it going to affect Eric Kendricks' play on the field? Maybe he'll be able to shadow it out or maybe block it out of his mind. But that's got to be a lot that he's dealing with. But I just don't understand why football players in general, they are usually the players that get involved in this stuff on a routine basis and on a frequent basis. This stuff happens all the time. You never hear about the Minnesota Timberwolves. Oh, man, it's the offseason. I hope Jimmy Butler and Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins, I hope they don't get arrested. What? I'm a Mavericks fan. I'm not sitting here saying, oh, I hope Dennis Smith Jr. and Luka Doncic and Dirk Nowitzki, I hope they don't get arrested, because it doesn't happen. I mean, it happens in the NBA and other sports, but not as frequently as this crap. That's ridiculous. So you know what? We'll have to see how the legal – Caleb Jones, he's gone. As far as Michael Kendricks, what happens to him, he's already admitted guilt, so we'll have to see how that works. Now moving on from that, getting into some Viking-specific talk. Brett Jones. So the Vikings acquired Brett Jones, guard/center, from the New York Football Giants for a 7th-round draft pick, I believe, in 2019. And to that, I say, that's great. I love this trade. In fact, I bleeping really love this trade, man. Look, worst case scenario, Brett Jones is Nick Easton. Best case scenario, he's Joe Berger. I looked it up on, because I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm pretending where I'm studying, all 22 films on all these offensive linemen throughout the league. Oh, yeah, I can tell you these advanced metrics. I don't know. But I did a quick research on Pro Football Focus. And here's the thing. When it comes to stats, I'm more of an eye test guy. But as far as stats are concerned, are you good or not? I think that's a fair assessment. And Pro Football Focus has him as being a pretty good pass blocker. And to his credit, the New York Football Giants last year, that offensive line was just terrible. It really, really was. So for him to stand out in that unit, that says a lot. And you know what? The fact that you needed a piece, I still think you need one more piece to add to this offensive line unit, because again, for the optimal strategy, for the optimal protection for Kirk Cousins. Look, Kirk Cousins, maybe he can get outside the pocket once in a while. He's not Case Keenum, dude. He's really, really not. And you saw that in the Seahawks game, where it's just like that defensive line was getting after Kirk Cousins, what have you. And I get that Pat Elflein's hurt, but you really, really need to have Mike Remmers on right tackle. Experimenting him at guard right now and having Rashad Hill at right tackle, I'm just not so sure that that's going to be a long-term solution for 16 games in the regular season. Now, Brett Jones, he comes in. Pat Elflein, I said I wasn't worried about him. He's recovering from surgery, but it's looking like he may miss week 1 going against the San Francisco 49ers. So hopefully he can come back in week 2. But at least for right now, Brett Jones in week 1, he can play center. And then when Pat Elflein comes back, he can go to either left guard, where Tom Compton has been a disaster, or ideally, you can put Mike Remmers to right tackle, and you can put Brett Jones at right guard, and then figure out you still need to get one more piece. Just get one more guard to solidify either that left guard or right guard spot. Or let's say if you have Brett Jones at left guard, Pat Elflein at center, and worst case, you have Danny Isidore at right guard. I just want Mike Remmers back at right tackle. I think Rashad Hill, his value is coming off the bench in case someone gets hurt, where he has to fill in for a couple of games. Not necessarily 16 games in the season, but I like the trade. I really, really do. That's a good step up from what we had in Seattle last week. I still think you need one more trade. And Mike Zimmer alluded to the fact that, hey, once this 53-man roster is set, that isn't necessarily the final roster. We could still make a trade. Paul Allen, I believe, is that Paul Allen? Yeah, Paul Allen on the mic. What he's called over there in Minneapolis, big-time Vikings voice head over there. He said, look, I wouldn't be surprised if they trade, a defensive back for an offensive line. So we'll have to see how it works. I still think you need one more piece. But if you can get this dude, Kirk Cousins, some protection, I think we're real set to make a serious run at the Super Bowl. Now, next, Daniel Carlson, right? So Daniel Carlson, and I said on this podcast, I was like, I don't understand why you cut Kai Forbath. It wasn't really fair. You went out and you drafted a kicker for no reason, and it wasn't like the kicking position was a dire need. Now, here's what I said heading into the draft. I said heading into the draft, the 3 main priorities for me was offensive lineman, cornerback number 2, and wide receiver number 3. Then after that, if you're thinking about trading Anthony Barr, which it looks like they're not, Anthony Barr, he's great, whatever. I'm never going to back down from that stance. You could maybe look at a linebacker as the number 4 option. But anyway, offensive lineman, cornerback, wide receiver. Kicker was nowhere near that list because, again, Kai Forbath has never cost the Minnesota Vikings games. There was never a point in time where you're like, damn it, Kai Forbath, he lost us that game. In crunch time, he makes those kicks. There was nothing to, and guess what? Kickers nowadays, they're all missing extra points. And I get Kai Forbath, he really had issues. He was one of the worst in the league as far as extra points are concerned. But in late game, kickers they're gonna miss kicks sometimes. It's never ideal for a kicker to miss a kick. Okay, I get that. But in terms of late game situations, Kai Forbath was that dude. It was never to the point where you're just sitting there stressing the hell out like, oh, God, is this dude going to make a kick? Oh, okay, he made one. I can rest now. I can rest easy. My heart can rest now. It was never like that. Now this dude, Daniel Carlson, you trot him out there on the field. Oh, this dude, he is the bona fide kicking starter, and he goes out there and he misses back-to-back 42-yard field goals and barely squeaks an extra point in. And what's really interesting, so I wrote a piece for the Viking Age where I said Daniel Carlson is the kicker that the Minnesota Vikings deserve, okay? I was being extra sarcastic. Those that follow me, I'm sarcastic as hell with the stuff that I say. Because, look, my thing is with Daniel Carlson is like, look, he brought back that old feeling of stressing out. When you see that kicker walking out onto the field and say, oh, Lord, is he going to make that kick? He brought that old feeling back, man, after, oh, man, he's going to do great, and he's broke all these stats at the University of Auburn, and now Kai Forbath gets cut, and what happens? He has a disaster. And then don't talk to me about, I'm freaking out. Oh, it's just preseason, you're freaking out. Don't talk to me. Let's look at Mike Prefer. Mike Prefer literally said about Daniel Carlson. He said, what is this? He said, going into Thursday night's game against the Tennessee Titans, Mike Prefer said, quote, regarding Daniel Carlson, I think Thursday night will be a good test. I think Carlson and Quigley and all our guys, for them, it's the Super Bowl. They have to go out and play hard. Really? Really? So now we got to worry about this is the fourth game in the preseason. It's the Super Bowl for our kicker, the only kicker we have on our team, the dude that you thought was an upgrade, not necessarily Mike Prefer, but Rick Spielman, the guy that you thought was an upgrade over Kai Forbath. This is a Super Bowl for him. Really? That's what we're doing now? So don't talk about that. I'm freaking out. The coaches are freaking out. And then there was a point in time where after I believe his first missed field goal, the Minnesota Vikings, they scored a touchdown. Or maybe it was after his second missed field goal. Anyway, after a missed field goal, whether it was the first or second, the Vikings, they scored a touchdown. They scored a touchdown, right? And I was like, all right, bring him out there. Let's see if he can make the extra point. And the Minnesota Vikings, they decided to go for two. They missed the 2-point conversion. And after the game, Mike Zimmer explained the decision to go for 2 points instead of going for the extra point.
Just let him know that if he's going to miss him, I'm going to go for 2.
So now we already had enough worries about this offensive line. Can they keep Kirk Cousins upright? Can they protect Dalvin Cook in the running game? Can they open up holes for these dudes? That was already stressful enough. There was no stress with the kicker position. Everything else was set where it's like the offensive line. That's the one thing that will make this team do something in the Super Bowl or make a run in the playoffs at least. And you go out of your way to go to bring a question mark at the kicker position again. Why did you have to do this, Rick? Why did you have to do that, man? I just don't understand why you had to do this. But you know what? I don't want to hear anything from Rick Spielman. I don't want to hear anything from the coaches. I don't want to hear it. You decided that this was the route that you wanted to go. Whatever happens, happens. So anyway, more Vikings talk. But first, I'm going to get into Kyle Sloter, Laquan Treadwell, and actually Dan Snyder. He mentioned something about Alex Smith. I keep going back to Alex Smith because Kirk Cousins used to play with the Washington Redskins. Dan Snyder made an interesting quote, kind of casting some shade at Kirk Cousins. Before I get into that, if you're not able to watch the podcast on YouTube, if you're not able to watch the video podcast that we have on here, no worries. You can listen on iTunes. You can search on your Apple Podcast. Just search Realistic Randy. It will be able to show up so that way you can listen to me on your road or on the car or whatever it is. If you're at work and you're trying to just get through the day at work, I get it, man. I listen to podcasts while I'm at work all the time. So, hey, you can listen to me on iTunes, audio, or you can watch it on the video podcast. So, anyway, getting back to things, let me get into Dan Snyder real quick. Dan Snyder was quoted as saying that Alex Smith is, quote, a breath of fresh air, right? A breath of fresh air. We don't have no more issues to deal with now that Kirk Cousins is gone. A breath of fresh air? More like a breath of fresh checkdowns. Are you serious right now? Alex Smith, for everybody that's sitting here saying, oh, we've upgraded at quarterback with Alex Smith, with weapons that are subpar, the same weapons that Kirk Cousins had, and he balled with them throwing 4,000 yards, and there's no Tyreek Hill, no Travis Kelce, no Kareem Hunt. Are you serious? Right? And look, here's the thing about Alex Smith I'll give him credit for. He doesn't turn the ball over. He makes the right throws. I'll give him that. He's very, very safe. But being safe isn't going to cut it when you're talking about scoring points. This is going to be one of the Washington Redskins. They're going to have one of the worst offenses in the entire NFL this year. You can book it. Write that down. I don't give a damn. That's why I said this game is going to be catered to the running game. And that's why I said Adrian Peterson, I would not be shocked if he gets 1,100 or 1,200 yards this year. Look, I get it. I criticized Adrian Peterson a ton when he was with the Vikings. Basically because he was a he still is a one-dimensional running back. But with this offense, and I got roasted on Twitter when I brought up, this was before the preseason game where he showed out and he looked really, really great. And he's better than all the other running backs that the Redskins have. Look, I said, this dude, I'm not going to be shocked if he breaks 1,100 to 1,200 yards. And everyone's like, well, that's not realistic, Randy. Or no, that's not realistic, Randy. And I get that a lot, but I'm just saying I've got a lot of receipts for everybody that's been talking crap on me for when this season is over. So anyway, moving forward with that, staying in the quarterback talk, and look, Kirk Cousins was a better quarterback than Alex Smith. He is, always will be. They're going to have one of the worst offenses in the NFL. Now, staying with quarterback, going to the Minnesota Vikings. Now, Mike Zimmer, you know what? He's a defensive guru. He turned this team around ever since he came here as a head coach. He said something after the Seahawks game that had me just, you know what? It just had me scratching my head, man. Now, here's the thing. Kyle Sloter. Last year, there was a lot of hype with Kyle Sloter, and as a Vikings fan, I was like, I don't understand that. You see a couple of Twitter accounts like, Sloter is your savior, and there's a couple of like Kyle Sloter accounts that comment on my YouTube videos. It's hilarious, but there's a lot of hype with Kyle Sloter. I was like, all right, whatever, we'll see how he does. And now I've watched him in every single game in this preseason, and I get it. I'm all on the Kyle Sloter train. This dude is a machine. He's confident. He's got swagger. He makes throws. He stretches the field. He opens up the playbook. He can make any throw. It's just more so getting him going against better competition. He's been going against the threes. I want to see him go against the twos. I think going up against this Tennessee Titans team, where basically it's just the twos and threes playing all day. Hopefully Kyle Sloter gets a little bit of extended time. But the thing that ticked me off about Mike Zimmer, this dude said, and this from Courtney Cronin, Vikings beat writer for ESPN.com. Courtney Cronin tweeted out, quote, or Mike Zimmer said, Mike Zimmer reiterates that there's no question Trevor Siemian is the Vikings backup quarterback. Oh, for real? Trevor Siemian, he's the QB2? Are we being for real right now? Trevor Siemian, dude, I don't understand. And he's like, well, he's just got to get better, and he's got to work on this and this and this. I don't care what metric you use. I don't care what type of analytics you use. There is no justification for saying that Kyle Sloter is the QB3 behind Trevor freaking Siemian. I'm sorry. I'm sure Trevor Siemian, he's a good guy. But look, Trevor Siemian, he reminds me of Christian Ponder. Deer in the headlights. I feel like I traveled back in time and watched Christian Ponder all over again. Dumps it off to his running backs if his first read isn't there. And the offense just staggers every time he's out there on the field. And as soon as Kyle Sloter comes out there, you want to talk about a breath of fresh air, Dan Snyder? That's a breath of fresh air. Kyle Sloter compared to Trevor Siemian. Trevor Siemian should be gone. He should be gone. If Kirk Cousins, God forbid, if Kirk Cousins was to go down and Trevor Siemian has to step in and say, oh, he's going to be the QB2, we are absolutely screwed. Look, Trevor Siemian and Kyle Sloter, they both played behind bad offensive lines throughout the preseason. Kyle Sloter has been head and shoulders above Trevor Siemian. And people get on me all the time talking about, why are you so negative and getting on this team? I'm not being negative. I'm just calling it what it is. Stop being so dumb. Stop doing dumb stuff. If you're not doing dumb stuff, I don't have to talk about it. I talk about all the time how good Stephon Diggs is and the defense and all that other stuff. I talk about that all the time and how great of a GM that Rick Spielman is 90% of the time and how Mike Zimmer is a great head coach, but that he focuses more on the defense than the offense. That's not just making that up. That's just fact. But as far as this, you're so negative. Why the hell? I don't care. I don't care that Mike Zimmer's the head coach. Oh, well, he's the head coach. And, Trevor Siemian, he's got experience. I don't give a damn that Mike Zimmer is the head coach. He's seeing the same games. It's all about putting the best players out there on the field. And there is no justification for sitting here saying that, Trevor Siemian is the quarterback too. There's no question about it. Are you serious? The amount of garbage, the amount of trash that they force-fed us onto the field and came up with every excuse saying, oh, you don't understand. Laquan Treadwell playing ahead of Jarius Wright. Stuff like that where you're like, what are you doing? Why are you coming up with all these excuses for these terrible players? But you have a dude in Kyle Slaughter where it's like, oh, man, I want to see more of this dude. Put him up against the twos. Let him develop a little bit more. Oh, no. Pump the brakes a little bit. Trevor Siemian, he's the number 2 guy. Are you serious right now? Stop doing dumb stuff, man. Why do we go out of our way to do dumb stuff? We all see the games. Did we all see the games? Everybody know Trevor. Look, I'm not big on stats and advanced analytics, but as far as are you good? Are you good at your job? I believe stats are good for at least that baseline. Now, if you're going from that to who's the best quarterback, who's the wide receiver, I think the eye test plays as well. But if we're talking about, just Trevor Siemian, and he needs to work on this, Trevor Siemian, ever since he's been in the league, has been a disaster. Like, are you good at your job? Are you okay? Are you okay, Trevor Siemian? Let me look this up real quick. Trevor, are you okay? Trevor, are you okay? Are you okay, Trevor? Okay. All right, here we go. Trevor Siemian, the last 2 years, so not this year, this is his 4th year in 2018. The last 2 years, he started 24 games. This is according to ProFootballReference.com. He started 24 games. And in those 24 games started with the Denver Broncos, he's thrown a combined 30 touchdowns and 24 interceptions. And his career completion percentage is under 60%. Never threw over 60% in his career. He's been garbage. Ever since he was a starter with the Denver Broncos, he's been garbage. In the preseason, he's been garbage. There's nothing left to talk about. Why do we go out of our way to do dumb stuff? Why? Why do slow drivers drive in the left lane? What the hell is wrong with y'all? There are literally signs up and down the highways of California that says slower traffic, keep right. But these dudes, they just say, nah, the hell with that. I'm taking that as a suggestion. They're driving 10, 15 miles per hour below the speed limit in the left lane. And then you put your high beams on, you beep the horn like, come on, get out the way. They're like, nah, man, I'm cool. I'm chilling right here. And just putting in the left lane, forcing dudes like me to have to zigzag left and right. Why do we go out of our way to do dumb stuff, man? And where did these asshole, rebellious, slow drivers in the left lane come from? Where did they come from? It's like they just woke up one day just tired with how the rest of us drivers been treating them all these years. That's it. I'm sick of getting treated this way and getting pushed around. I'm good as a driver, however it is I am. Honey, pack up the kids. We're driving in the left lane today. You jackasses. Stay in the right lane where you belong. Why do we go out of our way to do dumb stuff? I just don't understand it. And lastly, what I'm going to say, I've been criticizing this dude for a while now, but I'm going to give this dude a shout out. He really does deserve it. Laquan Treadwell, he had a really nice game against the Seahawks last week, and I think that Kirk Cousins, he's developing a little bit of a rapport with Laquan Treadwell. If I'm not mistaken, he caught a big third down pass to extend the chains. What was it, like 15 yards? The only thing is, look, I know speed's never been Laquan Treadwell's thing, but once he got that ball, he's like kind of like running like Kyle Rudolph, like, hello, everyone. Good to see you here. Slow and steady wins the race. I just don't understand. But you know what? He's had a good camp. He's had a good preseason. Good for him. As much as I thought that Kendall Wright would be the automatic wide receiver 3, Laquan Treadwell is definitely that guy. I wouldn't be surprised if Kendall Wright gets cut, but I think he'll make the roster. Holton Hill, there's been talks about he hasn't looked great. He hasn't looked great in the preseason. I get that. But I think he's still got a ton of talent. I think he'll stay. Marcus Sherrills, I think he actually might be out. His whole thing, his number one, actually the only asset that he's provided that he's been able to contribute with this team is punt returns. And now you've got a guy in Mike Hughes who can cover and make punt returns and kickoff returns for that matter. Hey, if that's all that Marcus Sherrills can do, and Mike Hughes can do the same thing, I think Marcus Sherrills might be out this year. So we'll have to see how that goes. This is a big game going against the Tennessee Titans. I know it's the starters, they're not going to play, but I'm looking for good. And actually, one more thing I'm going to bring up. The defensive line. There's been a couple of defensive linemen. David Perry and Odenigbo. I can't pronounce his name. David Perry and Odenigbo, they've looked really, really good in the preseason. I want to emulate. I hope the Vikings take a note from the playbook of the Philadelphia Eagles. I know we hate them. They're the Eagles. They disrespect us. I get all that. But the thing that the Eagles have that they did really, really well, they've got a rotation of defensive linemen. If we can do the same thing, I think that will be really optimal for this defense. If you have some fresh legs come in once in a while, I think that'll be really, really good. So I think there's a lot to look forward to, even though the starters aren't playing. Who's going to make the 53-man roster, we'll just have to see. So anyway, we do this once a week. Mediokr at Best Sports Podcast. I hope you guys like it. If you like it, subscribe to this podcast on YouTube, iTunes. You can follow me on Twitter at realistic_Randy or Facebook. You can just search Realistic Randy and you'll see me there. We'll see you next week.